Lenin once said that capitalism will be hanged by its own rope. The Great Depression of 1929 in the West and the world financial tsunami of 2008 seem to make this statement more and more true. But at the moment, it is very paradoxical that the world's most uncontrollable capitalism is happening in China, a country that still holds the title of Communist Party. The communist economy hanged the Soviet Union, and China was spared the immediate abandonment of the communist economy 3 decades later. However, its neck was wrapped around its own woven noose of capitalism with Chinese characteristics. In the 1980s and 1990s, the big problem in Chinese finance was the triangle debt. That is, the problem of state-owned enterprises lending to each other, and the state enterprises lent to the local government, or the local government borrow from the state enterprises. And in the end, no one was able to pay back the money. The former Premier Zhu Rongji established 4 major non-performing assets acquisition companies, restructured the banking system, developed the stock market, limited those state-owned enterprises, and pushed forward the private enterprises, joined the WTO, and introduced foreign capital on a large scale in order to ease the domestic credit crisis and establish the operational platform for China's economic rise. However, with the one-party dictatorship and the rule of law being used by the party, the capitalism introduced soon became a monster characteristic of the Chinese Communist Party. The party system and its families served as the parent of the monster. And governments at all levels, as well as state-owned enterprises and private enterprises at all levels, give birth to a circle of small monsters, eating the mother's nipples and even excrement. The rapid growth of the past 20 to 30 years has come about in this way. The whole process can be described as having the shape of Western capitalism, but without its gods, with thousands of monsters from small government and civilian intertwined. Using today's term, 300 times of triangle debt is probably not enough to describe the triangle debt of those years. No one can say clearly the total amount of domestic debt in China, but the total is always about 200 trillion RMB, equivalent to 3 times of the GDP. More fatal, the link between debtors and creditors is loosened. It's often unclear who owes what. Compared to the runaway financial situation in China today and the subprime mortgage crisis in the United States in 2008, it is nothing at all. The good news is that China's financial system is not yet in line with the world. So its bubble is still smoldering, and even if it bursts, it will only bring about a real trade shock to the world without causing a global credit crisis. The bad news is that Taiwan and Hong Kong not only trade with China, but also make up a large proportion of China's investment. If China's financial bubble bursts, they will be double attacked by both the physical and financial sides. The present situation of the CCP is that it has acquired capitalist disease but refuses to take capitalist medicine. It closed the doors and play capitalism with totalitarianism. No matter how big China is, it will be the end. China is often described as crony capitalism or state capitalism. I think these 2 kinds of adjectives are both inaccurate and even misleading, because both terms see China's economic phenomenon as a variant of capitalism. But the truth is that the eccentricity of the past 30 years or so in China cannot be guided by the logic of capital, and only the logic of power can explain them. So in 2011, I coined a new word, the Powerism, in my book. The core feature of the Powerism is that the so-called capital in the West is only an attribute of power in China, while under capitalism, power is only the attribute of capital. Use the metaphor of entity and clone, for example. In the capitalism, capital is the entity and power is the clone. However, in the Powerism, power is the entity, and capital is the clone. It is so clear to explain the phenomenon of Chinese economy with the Powerism. For example, the ups and downs of China's stock market are in fact mostly determined by the political power. If we do not understand the power struggle of the CCP Central Committee and the power of its affiliated factions to which it belongs, it is impossible to understand the stock market. In China, for example, there is no such thing as what Western economics calls real estate. The marketability of real estate is based on the assumption that it has property rights. However, China's real estate has no property rights, only the right to use a certain number of years. Therefore, the nature of Chinese real estate is more like long-term debt, only a kind of financial products which depend on the credit of power, not hardware assets. Under the Powerism, all the asset values in China belong to the rulers. If the power hand over, the value will be hand over also. That is why the infighting in the Communist Party is so bloody, and why private entrepreneurs have the opportunity to convert temporarily owned assets into cash and flee to capitalist countries. Not only the private enterprise money flees, even the state-owned enterprise operator. The power struggle defeats also the money flees. Even the authority personnel must reserve the path of money escape for their future possible power collapse. The recent spate of struggles, arrests and deaths of Chinese power figures and tycoons can be traced to this. Most of the Western financial crises under capitalism are derived from the excessive spread of financial commodities and the broken chain of debt. Once the financial crisis occurs in China under the Powerism, it must arise from the power to convert the assets into capital and then hollowed out the economic foundation.